I'm honored to moderate this panel, and I'd really like this to be interactive. I'm going to start off with a question for each one of the panelists, but I'd like you to be thinking about the question you would like to ask any one of us. So I'll be calling on you here in just a minute. Emile, you've been a visionary. You've got a reputation of being a visionary, and you'll come up with big ideas, but it's one thing to have big ideas. It's another one to execute them. What you've done with this net zero idea, describe what that idea was all about and what you're doing relative to execution.
So for people who followed, Newhall, we went through the approval process in the second round of approval with the Board of Supervisors in 2003. And we ended up being tangled in litigation for a long time and went all the way to the Supreme Court. And the Supreme Court decided to take it on the main issue, which was the greenhouse gas emission. And because we couldn't change any of the studies as we were going through litigation, the technology in the world of greenhouse gas changed a lot in 14 years. So the Supreme Court basically asked us to go back and do some more analysis to prove up that we're going to be carrying our fair share in terms of the state's targets. And we were meeting with a whole group, a lot of them are here, with our attorneys and consultants and everybody to respond to the Supreme Court. And we thought it was going to take us a few months to do that, and a year later we'll be fine. And we knew that at the end of the day, once we answer that question, we're ready to go. And people who were sitting here will tell you, I posed a question to people, and I said, let me ask you a question. Is there any way we can get to net zero? And for about a minute, I think people thought I was joking. And as always, the team accepted the challenge. 2 or 3 weeks later, they came back and said, we can do it. But it required a lot of out-the-box thinking. So we went through that. We got certified by the state, and today we're building the city as a net zero. Now, what did we have to do for that? Every home in Valencia, New Valencia, will have a charging station. We will have 2,000 charging stations within the community itself. We're putting 3,000 charging stations in LA County. We bought a forest and endowed it. We are retrofitting 6 schools in disadvantaged areas to green. And as we speak right now, we are replacing 100,000 cooking pots in Zambia, Africa, where they have a major issue where women over there do a lot of work. They cut the trees with the kids on their back. They carry 40, 50 pounds back. They cook in open pots. So they're destroying trees, emitting greenhouse gas. And every time they cook, the kid inhales 2 packs of cigarettes. And that's the #1 killer of kids. Mm-hmm. So that has a very emotional side to it. It's not a California program, but it's also a statement that at the end of the day, California can actually set the tone globally for what the answer is. And our hope right now is others will join us in programs like that so we can actually be the proving ground of how things could be done in the future.
Well, it's a world-class idea, and it's bringing about a world-class reputation. So thank you. That's innovative thinking. Right? Ravi, we talked about talent. We talked about the most active sector right now in our marketplace, and that is this creative talent. You're really at state and main in terms of feeding our community relative to this talent. Tell us a little bit about that graduating senior. What are they looking to do? Where are the jobs? Do they have to go outside of the area? Are they looking locally? Give us a sense of a profile of a graduating senior.
So at CalArts, we have a number of schools, but I would say one of the big attractions of a student, I mean, we take students from all over the world. Most of our students actually come from outside of the Los Angeles area, and I think they come to be in this area. Mm-hmm. So many of our graduating students actually stay here. They go on and form things like Pixar, obviously. That's happened in the past. So many are working in the studios. You talked a little bit about Netflix. Mm-hmm. All that content, things about that volume compared to the volume of the older model. In animation, they were stealing our alum from all the different studios, and they're coming up with new things. And of course, their model is to release the whole season at once, right? So there's content. So many of our graduates are going to become the storytellers there at Netflix and of course at Disney, but it seems like every one of the major studios has a new animation studio. So we're in that industry. The other thing you've seen, this explosion of essentially different kinds of all the different forms of art that's really been in Los Angeles. We had Freeze LA here, right? So we had a major worldwide fine art festival that really transformed, and it was something that everybody basically had doubts, which often happens about LA. It's like, oh yeah, LA's going to try to do that. They've tried to do a couple of festivals, but by all indication, Bettina pulled off something that was really remarkable and that has a lot of great press about it. Really, people feeling very good about it. But that's big, that's on a world spectrum. But LA has always been that city where artists actually are there. So while we aren't a commerce city like New York, meaning art is sold in New York, right? Art is made in Los Angeles. Right. So artists have studios all over, from Vernon to Silmar, et cetera, really industrial areas. They take over some of those buildings, the so-called arts district as it is downtown, right? And that's part of the history of that. So many of our artists stay here. But the housing problem you were talking about, that's really front and center for every one of our graduates, right? So while they might find employment, they might join the gig economy as it was described before, they might do so many other things. The housing is a real struggle. So, I think we think about, and I promise Emile and I didn't write our things together because there was so much alignment really and how we look at how this future is moving. Education is going to be key, especially for young people. We're talking like the K-12 space, right? That sort of education and teaching those kids how to negotiate differences, how to think, expansively, how to solve problems is really going to be where that has to happen. But where are those families going to live? So I think we have an opportunity here in this valley when you're building housing, where we're building the schools along with them, where that's really going to fuel, and you can see how it's basically conditions are almost perfect, right, for a community to drive a lot of economic development here.
Right. Oh, well done. Emile, you talked about old and new, you talked about rich and poor, you talked about the integration of communities with cultures. You've been doing that at the Great Park. Talk about some of the specifics relative to how you've infused culture, and even talk about some of the physical. There's some real estate folks in here, so the idea around a garage or the idea around being able to put affordable next to high-end. Describe really some of the physical things that you've done to make that happen.
Sure. So today, if you go down to the Great Park, we have 3,200 families living there. Out of that, 544 of them meet the very low income. We made the conscious decision to go to a very low income. Irvine, median price is $1.1 million for a home. It's very expensive. The barrier to entry for people who do not make a certain amount of money is very high. And what we have done is really we've looked at our program in a way where we also address the multi-generation issue. As I said before, one of the biggest issues we have right now is the separation of family because of the affordability of housing. You have people who are living on retirement money. They can't live close to their kids. They're living way far. They see their grandchildren twice a year. And as much as we keep on talking about assisted living, and I was talking to somebody who has an assisted living program across the border, and we're focusing on how do we take care of the elderly physically, we're missing the fact that we are traumatizing them emotionally. They're at a stage in their life where they're vulnerable. We separate them from family, from their environment, and send a message to them that we're sending you to die. So we have a program over there where we provide homes for elderly who meet the very low income, they're living in retirement. It's very rewarding when we go and see them across the street from their grandchildren. We also do it for families where kids today can go to a state-of-the-art public school in the Irvine district. We have a high school we built that cost us $300 million in 2 K-8s. And I tell you why that is important. Because one of the biggest challenges today as we start seeing classes is that everybody seems to want to talk about how do we actually attack the problem at the upper class, taxation, all that. And I don't hear a lot of people about how do we bring people from the bottom up. And when you have a kid who grows up and is, in the workplace or in real life interacts with somebody who they believe comes from a wealthier family, we're all human. There's a sense of insecurity that becomes preventative. When two kids go to the same school together and both of come from totally different means, they sit across the table from each other. They compete with each other in class. They play music together, and the person who comes from a less of a means starts believing that I can compete with that person. That's how you take the people from the bottom and push them up, by telling them you can. So that's really what we focus on. That's what we do. That's our program. And as I said, expect to see the same over there. We're building across the state 6,000 affordable housing units.
Yeah, and again, a great idea, implemented well. Ravi, your population, is it local? Is it, the students that come to your university, is it global? Give us a sense of who's attending.
Sure. So it's a very small student body. So despite its sort of on-the-hill presence, there's only about 1,500 students that go to CalArts. But as I was saying, less than half of those students come from state of California. So we really draw heavily on all 50 states, but then many countries. Almost 20% of our population is international. So a lot of students from Latin America. We have a lot of students from Asia, from India and China, Korea. So it's while it's a small community, it's one that's very, very diverse. 51% students on the identify as students of color at the campus. So, all of that is to say, even with 1,500 students, when CalArts started, Disney really had this dream of a city of the arts, he called it, right? A community of artists where some are teachers and some are students. And we built our initial dormitories, and I think the area in Valencia and what is now Santa Clarita was very, very reasonably priced. So many students wanted to live in the area. They lived in a lot of the apartment housing. They stayed after they graduated, et cetera, et cetera. Now when we see it, it's actually less expensive to live in campus housing, yet CalArts didn't really build a lot of that. Initially, because of that differential that exists. But the change was so quick, I think, that at this point, I could probably double the amount of housing I have on campus, and it would be full immediately.
Can I introduce you to a developer?
Yeah, exactly.
By the way, I'm in the deal. I'm in the deal, just so you know.
You will never fail to get a commission on anything.
Well, and you guys have, the CBR has been very helpful. We've, I'm sure some people know, we're looking at the golf course next door to us, because how do we embed ourselves in this community and really kind of engage in the ways that I think all three of us have been describing? It's that notion of public-private partnership, right? If we are a private industry, how do we engage this community and really become a part of what happens? And I think that's how we define that super important. We're going to have lots of young people who are coming through the educational system. The public schools here. It's a big draw for this area. Well, we're one of the best art schools in the world. Why is there not one of the best arts, high schools in the world also here in Santa Clarita? Right. These are questions that I'm wondering and asking, right? Because what does the state of California have in terms of the skin in that game? What does Santa Clarita have? Because I think I know where CalArts is in terms of, you've heard about our curriculum and our education and how I think that's so very important to students, especially at the K-12 level, if no matter what they end up doing. Because that's really at that level, it doesn't matter if you're able to solve problems, right? If you're able to look at it creatively. Because in the end, we're not training factory workers anymore, right? And the world that they live in is not going to have these, I love this notion of silos or compartmentalization of time, right? All of us know that. All of us probably in this room grew up with that existence, and we saw it even develop. But we also see this tension, right? The things you talked about, retail, the change in Amazon, that's already showing you how people are pushing forward and basically dealing with that. They have market forces pushing on them, right? If they don't increase that profit, they're going to be in trouble in that space. So they're obviously leading that space. Education, it's a different thing because it's a lot of it's public space, et cetera, haven't changed from that agrarian model. We have whole summers where it's blank. How many people other than teachers have their summer blank? I work all the way through the summer, right? So this is very difficult, right? For the reality of that, the lived experience. And so, it's super exciting to be here in this moment.
All right, we have an opportunity. We have about 5 more minutes. So there's an opportunity to ask some of the greatest innovators and visionaries in our business some questions. So who's got a question? We've got some microphones around here. We've got a question there in the back. Sir, go ahead and stand. We got a microphone right next to you.
I appreciate what you gentlemen have put before us. It's a lot to chew on, a lot to think about. My area of interest is transportation, some of you may know. And transportation seems to intersect with all of your industries. Obviously, housing, obviously, education, and of course, commercial real estate. And there's a revolution in transportation going on in Los Angeles right now. The county is about to, through one source, collect $120 billion over the next 10 years to be invested in transportation. My question is, how do you fit transportation issues and opportunities into your thinking in your various enterprises?
Well, I think transportation is going to be key for a long time. And I think that we are at a point where we're seeing a transformation in transportation, an innovation, a disruption in transportation. And everybody wants to say that Uber is a technology company. It's a transportation company. It just changed the way transportation. The other thing that I think is going to change transportation a lot is the autonomous car, driverless car. Because if you think about it today, we are all investing a lot of money to still build infrastructure based on codes that we're using from the past. How many people are still building garages when we know that they're not going to be used, but we haven't changed anything, so we have to build a garage, and a lot of people building garages will tell you, well, I'm building it so I can adapt it to something else tomorrow. There couldn't be a more, silly statement than that. Highways. Today, rather than building new infrastructure, I believe that the autonomous car, when it gets to a place where it drives 4 inches away from each other and they can communicate, they're going to create so much capacity on the roads that we're not going to worry about building more infrastructure investing. We just have to make sure that the technology gets here fast. This is where public-private partnership is key. Because there's nobody who's going to sit here and say that the autonomous car is still a dream. It's a reality. My biggest fear is going to be proven up commercially in places like Shanghai and Dubai and India before it gets proven up in a country that put the first man on the moon, because we have this tension going on of not working together, public and private, so we can actually adapt the technology on the roads to start allowing these cars to be there. So from my perspective, if we can deal with transportation and deal with it right, a lot of the issues we're talking about are going to become a problem, because you can't, we're at capacity. How many roads you're going to be able to build, or highways you're going to be able to build that take the capacity of all the millions of square feet that Lou's working on right now, and all the thousands of homes that hopefully we'll be able to build. But I think that as with everything, there are two things that I think are happening in the world that are changing industries. Technology and utilization of technology and shared economy. And I think that we have a generation today that is much more trained to deal with shared economy and shared transportation than the previous generation. And we took us a long time to get people on a carpool. Today, my kids rarely use their car. They're on Uber, they share Ubers, they take that. We're now proposing to build a project in Irvine that has no garages. No garage, single family, that we will go ahead and buy 20 Teslas and make them available for the residents to use at will, and prove up that you have people who are willing to buy a home without a garage. Now, just to give you a feel, that same home, its price is at 18% less than the home with the garage. So, and if you go to somebody who's 28 years old who want to get into home ownership and cannot, you say to them, that's the home 18% less than the other home. You don't have to have a car payment, car insurance, or gas. Take that money and put it towards home ownership and start building equity for your future. So the issue of transportation is key, but we have to start taking a leap of faith into where technology is going to take us in order for us to prove it up.
I also think there's going to be a change in the way that people are adapting. I mean, we're using technology in our offices now, so we're killing meetings. We're having Zoom meetings. We're figuring out ways to go off patterns, because frankly, if you're in West LA at 4 o'clock or 3 o'clock, you're not moving. It takes you an hour to get to the freeway. So we've adjusted our conduct based on traffic patterns today, and frankly, you can see where values have been adjusted based on congestion. Okay, I think we have time for one more.
Basically, you said we were building about one house for every 100 new jobs we created. That's part of a problem. The other is the fact that getting entitlements almost impossible in every jurisdiction in California, and Los Angeles County and the city of Santa Clarita aren't any better. When you spent $100,000 per dwelling unit just in entitlement fees, how do you build affordable housing, and how do you get these costs down to where these jobs that we generated can afford to live in these houses if you can figure out how to build those houses?
Sure. Well, first of all, I think that there was a lot of confusion about, do we bring housing to jobs or do we bring jobs to housing? I think if we're going to talk about bringing housing to jobs, we find ourselves building a lot of high-rises in downtown LA, which is not really going to be dealing with affordability because the cost of construction is way high. So we have to think about bringing jobs to housing. I think the way you're going to deal with that is innovation in the way the home is built. Every industry today has found a better way of streamlining building whatever they build. The auto industry, everything. Except home building still builds a home the same way we built it 300 years ago. Same nail, same hammer, you know? And the way you're going to do it is by starting to change the way you build homes. Because today, I can build actually modulars, I can build homes. Look, USC has a home being built with a 3D printer. You know? So the way it's going to happen is that way. Now, here's where the other interesting opportunity is. Why do we have always resistance in terms of doing that? Because, rightfully so, labor fights you back on anything that is going to take jobs away. That's their job. And that's what you're going to see happening. And hopefully we will be on the front end of that, where we go and do the same thing we did with the environmental community, partner with labor, and say, come help us build a home in a more efficient way. You have the expertise. We have the ability to provide you the opportunity. Let's put it together. Let's build a home that we can build for 35, 40% less, because I can assure you I can build it for that much less. Shorter cycle time. And let's actually create affordability of housing through innovation of how do you build a home. That's how it's going to happen. But it's not going to happen, honestly, by us keep on complaining about it. It's going to happen by somebody saying, I'm willing to take some risk and do something a little bit different.
And we've got to increase density. We've got to grow up. I mean, we've been growing out. We need to go up. And if we can go out here, in a community that has the ability to go out. But in the urban core, you've got to grow up. And what's happening right now, we tried to get a homeless shelter built, high-density homeless shelter. By the time we were through with the neighborhood, we got that entitlement cut in half. So we've got to, there's two things that really have to happen. We have to look at our density laws. We've got to look at CEQA reform. And we've got to focus on where are we going to start investing relative to even frankly, the issue that we have right now, which is a homeless shelter. It takes $500,000 to build an urban shelter per bed in LA. It doesn't work.
Look, can I say something? Because I think you just hit on something important, which is density and all that. Because I think that's where you find yourself with the tension of transportation and all that. I said one of the things that attracted us to this place is how impressed we were with Valencia. Mm-hmm. There's a lot of things to be impressed with Valencia. But Valencia had some leadership decades ago that created the place that has a 3-to-1 job housing balance. Mm-hmm. There isn't a place that was envisioned in totality, not even honestly with Irvine, with all my friends down at the Irvine company, that had that vision and stayed true to that balance. Now, what's happening today is we're creating jobs without housing, and that balance is going the other way. For the longest time, we actually created housing without jobs and waited for the jobs to come. Right. We have to start thinking about job housing balance in order for us to create density and to try to encourage people not to use the highways.
Holly, we're not leaving. We're not leaving. I'm kidding. Okay.
On that spectacular end note, please give them a round of applause. Okay, thank you. I think you can all agree, as I said when I opened, an exciting time for the Santa Cruz Valley, great future ahead of us.